Well, good morning, CHD. I am your host, Brian Hooker, and this is Doctors and Scientists. And you know that if it's Doctors and Scientists, it's Friday. So happy Friday to everybody. And this guest today this whole thing is troubling and fascinating all at the same time. Not that the guest is troubling and fascinating, but what he brings to bear and what he brings to the table. Let's bring in U.S. Air Force Major Thomas Haviland. Tom Haviland, retired. You served for the Air Force in some way, shape, or form, for 36 years? Is that right?
Right, 20 years in uniform and 16 years as a defense contractor. But it came to an abrupt halt, Brian, in October of 2021 when I refused to take the Joe Biden mandated COVID-19 vaccine. So I went into early retirement, which became a blessing because it allowed me to do for the last 3 years these worldwide embalmer blood clot surveys.
Well, First of all, thank you for your service and thank you for standing up. I mean, what a time to stand up and be counted for the side of truth when the astroturfers around were basically calling you any name in the book and looking at anything that they could throw up against the wall that would stick against you. But you know what? You stuck to your guns and it's made all the difference. And I'm so thankful for your work now. So let's jump right in. You've got results from the latest Embalmer survey. Is that correct?
Right. I sure do. I ran the latest survey from the 11th of November through the 14th of December, 2024. Sent it out to the usual suspects. I do a two-prong approach, Brian. I send it in a top-down approach to 50 national, regional, and state funeral director associations all around the world, each with hundreds of members under them, asking them to forward the survey down to their hundreds of embalmers or active embalmers. I also used a bottom-up approach. I looked up over 1,700 email addresses for 1,700 funeral homes around the world, and we sent an email to them directly with a link to a SurveyMonkey survey. Easy to take. Only takes about 3 or 4 minutes to take. So, and at no point during the survey do I ever mention the words COVID or COVID vaccine. I wanted to keep the surveys, all three of them, the ones I've done the last 3 years, unbiased. I didn't want to lead the witness in any way. So that's what we did. But we usually ask the typical questions are, what are you seeing? When did you see it? And then, how much? And what percentage of your corpses are you finding these unusual phenomena? One thing before we get started is what's interesting. This year, I had the most responses I ever had. As you can see up there in the near upper left-hand corner, 301 people responded, embalmers, to this year's survey. And that was more than I've had the previous 2 years. Something strange, though, happened. My best performer for my 2023 survey, the Pennsylvania Funeral Directors Association, who that year actually forwarded my survey out, and I got 125 responses in just 2 days from embalmers in the state of Pennsylvania alone. This year, for some reason, they decided not to participate, even though the president of the Pennsylvania Funeral Directors Association himself sent me an email saying that he's seen unusual clotting. So that was very bizarre. So it makes me think there's something kind of, I wouldn't say a cover-up. I can't think of a better term to use than cover-up in terms of a reluctance to want to talk about this. In fact, as you'll see in some of the slides coming up, we actually asked some questions this year about that reluctance of embalmers and funeral directors associations to talk about this. So the first question of note that we asked them is, did you observe any of the large whitish fibrous structures? And we provide a photo of those so they make sure they distinguish between those and what's called chicken fat clots, which were around before COVID or the vaccines. They're much smaller, yellowish in color, tear very easily, much different than these large white fibrous clots. And when we back up, I'll show, here's a super one right here. This is a 5.5-inch clot, Brian, that an embalmer took out. It was either out of the abdominal aorta or the inferior vena cava. So that's right down your chest here. It's one of the largest blood vessels in the body.
Incredible. And the diameter on that is pretty large too.
Yeah, I'd say about almost half an inch. It is big.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
And then here's the more typical ones that Richard
Yeah.
Hirschman and a lot of the embalmers are seeing in the smaller blood vessels, but they can be just as dangerous, as you know. They can cause strokes and heart attacks.
Right, right.
So getting back to the survey, look at that result. 250 of the embalmers this most recent year in 2024 said they were indeed seeing the white fibrous clots. It's 83% of the 301 and it's up from 73% from last year. So we're going in the wrong direction, Brian.
We are absolutely. And that's it's super compelling, the extent to which these individuals are reporting these clots, and also it's interesting. It kind of matches also the overall vaccination rate of the United States.
Yeah.
For the
good news, by the way, this year, even though Pennsylvania, I lost the 125 responses I got from that state last year.
Yes.
This year, it was picked up by some new states, primarily Alabama, Florida, Louisiana, Tennessee, Texas, and Utah had big responses. That's what helped put us past the number of responses we had in previous years. In fact, the president of the Tennessee Funeral Directors Association, Mr. Taylor Moore, he's invited me to come down on the 8th of June of this year and give a presentation at their in-person conference to their funeral directors and embalmers. So that's good news. I think the dam is starting to break. The curtain's starting to be pulled back. And some of these funeral directors associations are realizing this problem's not going away, and they want to talk about it now. So that's a good thing.
Excellent.
What percentage of the corpses in the year 2024 that you've embalmed have had these large white fiber structures? As you can see there, if you in the red there, if you do a weighted average of all those bars, including the green bar, where 43 embalmers said they saw none, you get a weighted average of 27.5% of the corpses in year 2024 contain these white fibrous clots. And this surprised me a little bit, Brian, because it's up from 20% from last year. And I was hoping we'd go down, as people get further and further away from most people taking their last jabs back in 2021, because a lot of people passed on the boosters. I was hoping to see less of these clots. So it's telling me that maybe a couple of things. Maybe it takes a couple of years for these clots to grow to the size where they completely block a vessel and cause a stroke or heart attack. Right. Another thing this tells me is maybe that our bodies are turning it. People that have taken the vaccine, their bodies have turned into a spike protein factory, even years after they've taken the jab. So they're still producing spike and forming these clots. So I don't like either of those answers. Neither one's good. Those are possible explanations. Embalmers, they never saw these clots before, 2020 or 2021. I talked to Dr. John Campbell on his YouTube channel, and he's taking a look at some of his old pathology books. He's got 6 or 7 pathology books, and you'll see plenty of the photos of the grape jelly clots and the chicken fat clots, but you won't see any of these white fibrous clots. There was a condition back in the late 70s, early 80s called white clot syndrome that was heparin induced. I don't know if you remember that or not, Brian. There was a few cases, I guess, where there were some people that had problems with heparin. So I believe they started cutting back the dosage amount of heparin. And now, of course, we have new anticoagulants, like Eliquis, Pradaxa, Xarelto. So the heparin's not a problem anymore. But what's interesting about that, I think that heparin one was sulfur-based. We believe that what's driving these new white fibrous clots is phosphorus-based, and phosphorus just happens to sit right next to sulfur in the periodic table. So we think that the phospholipid nanoparticles, as well as the spike protein produced by the vaccine, may be combining with our natural fibrinogen, that's in liquid form in our plasma. So instead of fibrinogen converting normally to fibrin, white solid, it aggregates with platelets for a normal clot. Instead, it's creating these bizarre rubbery polymers. Instead, that are a combination of fibrinogen, alpha, beta, and gamma chain with the spike protein and the phospholipid nanoparticle. Not a good situation. No, but if you look over there to the left, you see 98 of the embalmers said they saw the white fibrous clots between 1 to 20% of their corpses. 74 embalmers saw it between 21 to 40% of the corpses, and it just goes down from there. And so, 23 of the embalmers saw it between 61 to 80% of their corpses. So this is scary. Because we knew we might have a different mix of embalmers answering this year's survey. You know, we had a lot of Pennsylvania embalmers last year. This year, we didn't have any Pennsylvania embalmers. So we asked the question just flat out, hey, compare what you saw in terms of white fibrous clots in the year 2024 versus 2023. And as you can see, the longest bar there is about the same. The 155 embalmers said that they saw about the same percentage of corpses with the clots in those 2 years. Some embalmers saw less in 2024. Some embalmers saw more clots in 2024. Right. So it kind of washes out and it's kind of an average, which I was, like I said, I was hoping it would go down, but it's not. We also started asking some questions to pick at the reluctance of the embalmers and funeral director associations to want to talk about this. So here's the first of those questions. We said, hey, do other embalmers that you talk to say that they're seeing the large white fibrous clots? As you can see there, the longest bar is the green bar, where 185 embalmers did say yes. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we've seen very few embalmers come forward publicly, right? Richard Hirschman's one, you know, John O'Looney, the funeral director over in the UK, a few others from the Died Suddenly film. But this is telling me, Brian, that many embalmers will admit to each other in private that they're seeing the clots, right? But they don't want to come out publicly and talk about it. You can see there 50 of the embalmers said no, and then there was even 66 embalmers that said, we don't talk about this. Well, what's going on there? Are they not curious? I mean, or maybe has their funeral director given them instructions? You're not to talk about this at risk of losing your job? You know, it's weird.
It really is too bad that you can't just have, you know, I live in a world of scientific inquiry, and so do you. And, you know, we're here where we are today because we ask questions. And so, you know, when people shut off this discourse, when we hear things like settled science or consensus science, or, you know, don't question the science, it just is, which came out of Peter Hotez's mouth just very recently. That's a significant percentage of those survey. That's almost 20% of the embalmer survey said we don't talk about this.
I know it really is discouraging. It is. And well, let's go on to the next couple questions. We'll delve into this actually topic a little bit more. First of all, we asked them about the other phenomenon the embalmers said they were seeing last year. We had on the survey last year. It's microclotting. You know, they described it as what looks like coffee grounds or dirty blood coming off out of the corpses. They're trying to get the formaldehyde in and draining the blood off the corpse. Right. We asked them again, did you see this phenomenon in 2024? And as you can see there, 78% of the embalmers, 233 of the 301 said, yeah, we're seeing the microclotting. And that's about the same as the percentage, almost exactly the same, almost as last year. We then, of course, then asked, okay, what percentage of your corpses have this microclotting or coffee grounds or dirty blood? Again, if you average all the bars together, including the 52 that said they saw none, you see a weighted average of 22% in year 2024, which is just down slightly from 25% in the year 2023. Now, this is a phenomenon that embalmers had seen prior to COVID and the vaccines, but less than 5% of their corpses. Typically, patients had had heavy chemotherapy. So this is at least a quadrupling of this particular side effect, which, as you know, Brian, can be just as dangerous as the white fibrous clots. You know, we think those are causing strokes and heart attacks. The microclotting occurs at the capillary level and can block the exchange of oxygen at the lungs and then carrying that oxygen to all the major organs of your body, including your brain, your eyes. And we know a lot of people have been suffering from brain fog and vision problems after taking the vaccine. So they could be having microclotting problems.
Exactly.
Yeah. And again, you know, 118 embalmers saw the phenomenon between 1 to 20% of their corpses. Another 79 embalmers saw between 21 to 40% of their corpses, and it just goes on from there. So again, a serious issue. When you combine that with the white fibrous clots, you know, it's kind of a double whammy. And actually, it's a triple whammy because the embalmers have also said they've seen an increase of about 30% in the grape jelly clots. They said that in our survey last year. Yeah, and they also that the grape jelly clots are more like grape jam now, or thicker than they used to be. Richard Hirschman likes to say the blood has changed, Tom. He says, ever since COVID and the vaccines, the blood has changed. Another psychological question here. We asked the embalmers, have you ever watched any of the online videos, such as the Died Suddenly movie, which people, by the way, can still see on Rumble? You know, that's the hour-long documentary where about half the movie is devoted to Richard Hirschman and 6 other embalmers who said they were seeing these white fibrous clots in their corpses. Or do you read articles? We want to know, are the embalmers doing research? And look at that, Brian. Only about 1/3 of them, 96 out of the 301, say that, yes, I'm watching these things or reading things online about these clots, despite the fact that 83% of them said they're seeing the clots.
The level of acquiescence, indifference is astounding. Wouldn't you think that even for your own physiology, I mean, my goodness, if this is happening to other people, this could be happening in my body, that it would behoove you to at least, look into where in the heck these things are coming from.
And it's actually lengthened it made their job harder. It's lengthened the time to do a normal embalming from about 1.5 hours to about 2.5 hours when they find a body that's riddled with the clots. Because instead of just going in like a one injection site point in the carotid and just being able to flush out the whole body from there, they have to use multiple injection site points, and they have to keep stopping, using forceps to remove the white fibrous clots they're finding. So I'm sure it's frustrating for them. We asked the embalmers, are you a member of a professional embalmer or funeral director association? And no surprise here, Brian, over 80% of them are members of either an embalmer or funeral director association. We asked them that question to kind of set them up for this next one. Has your professional embalmer or funeral director association ever discussed the large whitish fibrous clots? As you can see there, the vast majority of them not. Only about 20%, 52 out of the 301 embalmers said that embalmer associations are talking about this, and they have plenty of opportunity. They usually have either biannual or annual meetings in person, and then they also do monthly or quarterly newsletters to each other, so they can talk about this, but they're not doing it. It's bizarre. I have a couple of reasons why I think it might be happening, Brian. If a lot of these funeral director association presidents, they're funeral directors themselves, they elect one of their own as the president. Well, would you want to participate in a survey that might show a link between the COVID-19 vaccines and these unusual white fibrous clots if you had mandated that all the workers in your funeral home, including your embalmer, take the COVID-19 vaccine? You might be setting yourself up for a lawsuit, right?
That really makes a lot of sense. I had never really thought about that particular angle. But it is, again, the lack of curiosity so astounding. And it's not like your survey form is dotted with COVID-19 vaccine causes clots. This is something, your survey participants are just rating the presence or absence of clots. They don't know the patient's vaccination status. This is all, essentially they're anonymous except for when they see these phenomena, when they're basically draining the blood.
Right. Once in a while, the embalmer will discover the vaccination status of the corpse if the family volunteers that information. Right. They don't go asking that. Usually they wait. Because the family's mourning and they're grieving, and it's a hard time to be asking tough questions like that. Let's go ahead to the comment section. We invite all of our surveys the embalmers to write more about what they're seeing or not seeing in the embalming room if they want to, and quite a few of them responded. And like I said, we never mentioned COVID or COVID vaccines, but a lot of times that topic will come up with the embalmers themselves. Let me read just a couple of them to you. From Georgia here, it says, majority of decedents I've embalmed who present the large white fibrous clots were in the age range from late 50s to early 70s. Microclotting and grape jelly type clotting have been observed almost on every case who have hospitalized prior to death. I thought that was interesting. Any comments on that, Brian?
Well, I find that it's interesting that the age range is not, what you would typically expect for deceased individuals. It's younger. And so, it almost connotes that there's a confounding factor there, because I can't imagine being alive with those clots in your body. I mean, that's one of the things that's so interesting that, they survive that long. But that shift in age group, shift in demographic down to, 50s to 70s, it's telling something. I mean, I know there's a lot of, there's a lot of variables that you can't account for, you can't control for. Mm-hmm. But I mean, if this was just a natural aging phenomenon, it would be much different. Yeah,
and you hit on something earlier there. You said, you can't imagine somebody walking around with these things forming inside. The data, we're not quite sure what's going on right now. Dr. Philip McMillan, who runs the YouTube channel called Vegan Health, he thinks that the clots are forming very rapidly and acutely just before death and causing death, because he's doubting whether the clots, whether they're forming for a long time or not. I'm still not convinced of that. I think that both may be occurring. I think that they may be forming over a 2-3 year period. I also can understand that they might be forming acutely as well, just prior to death. Maybe like when becomes a saturation point in the fibrinogen in our blood. I know, typically I think we have about 6 grams per liter, and we have about 6 liters of blood in our adult body. So that'd be about 24 grams max of fibrinogen usually. But if the liver is going on overdrive to produce a whole bunch more fibrinogen because endothelial damage is getting, large, greater, then it might reach a saturation point. I've seen papers in the past where, like, once you get to like 7 grams per liter of fibrinogen in the blood, it becomes dangerous, and then the fibrinogen can start to precipitate out and solidify, and then you got trouble. So that may be part of what's happening as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's go back to the comments.
Okay, here's another one from Kentucky. I'll read 2 more from you. Here's one from Kentucky. I've been an embalmer since the early 2000s for an embalming service. I've never seen anything like this before the spring of 2021. I've experienced the white fibrous clots that have stretched out to 20 inches. It's like battling a rubber band. My right hand and elbow has suffered from these clots.
Oh my goodness.
I've been saying for the last 3 years, this isn't normal. I've recently spoken with a physician that's been hearing this in his field. We're in the same agreement that we feel we know where this has come from. And I think he's talking about a certain intervention. Here's a embalmer that has a opposite opinion. Brian, see what you think of this one. This is from Canada. Okay. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, which I assume this survey is pertaining to, I have not noticed any clots, fibrous structures, or contents in the blood outside the ordinary. It's also not our responsibility as embalmers to take note of these cases, record or share any information, as it is confidential medical information that breaches the privacy clause we have with our client families. Videos and articles such as "died suddenly" or anti-vaccine, COVID-denying propaganda that is based in no actual fact other than to spread right-wing beliefs and fear-mongering in the public. What do you think of that comment?
I think they forgot the kitchen sink. So what else in terms of ad hominem attack could they include in that? We're pretty much inoculated against ad hominem attack at this point in our lives. Unfortunately, their opinion in terms of what they saw really, you can't rely on that in the first place, because they basically acquiesced and said, well, even if I saw those clots, I wouldn't tell you in the first place, because somehow it's a privacy act, even though you don't know who I've embalmed, and you know that I'm from Canada, and that's about it. That's the time. I'm glad you showed that, Tom, because that's the preposterous type of criticism that people like you, who are, really doing God's work, receive every day. And it's very, very unfortunate. And I hope it just sort of rolls off your back.
Yeah, it does. And first of all, I wanted to show that because I do take all the answers I get, whether they're pro or con, right?
Right.
Also, I take big issue with what he said too. An embalmer, if he finds, for example, a gunshot wound or a stab wound in a corpse that's been overlooked by a coroner, he has a legal obligation to tell the authorities, the police, about that. I think the same thing goes in the case of these white fibrous clots and this unusual clotting. I think that the embalmers do have an ethical responsibility to tell the authorities that this is happening. They don't have to, like you say, name the corpse that it came out of. They can just say, hey, I'm seeing a lot of this new phenomenon that I've never seen, without breaching any kind of privacy clause about any individual person. So I have big problems with that, what that last guy from Canada said. And it's like he's calling the other ones, liars, right? Because we had 250 embalmers in this year's survey, 83% that said they were seeing the clots. So is he calling all those guys liars,
Well, weird. And there's no incentivization in this survey except for, you know, they're doing a survey monkey. So it's not like if they report the presence of these clots, they get a free TV at Costco. You know,
Exactly.
this is an anonymous survey. Nobody is basically, you know, disclosing their identity. Neither are they disclosing any type of reason for this particular phenomenon. All they're just saying is, all you're asking is, what did you see with your eyes?
Exactly. And as usual, Brian, as soon as I had the survey done, I submitted the results immediately to the FDA, CDC, and NIH.
Right.
But in the 3 years I've done this, I've never received any response back from them. It's horrible, you know? So why does a retired U.S. Air Force major have to do the CDC and FDA's job for them? They should be surveying these organizations, right? In fact, the organizations themselves should. For example, the British Institute of Embalmers is one of the places I sent the survey to. And they have on their, if you go to their website, on their very own website, they had a code of ethics. And they have key points. And key point number 4, I believe, in their code of ethics says that when they see something unusual in the area of embalming, they're supposed to investigate it and do research into it. So they're violating their very own code of ethics by not investigating this themselves and doing their own surveys amongst these organizations. And it's not just them, by the way. I tried to run a survey last year with vascular surgery societies. I had back in March, a whistleblower came to me, Brian, a gentleman in Florida. I won't name his name or exact location, but he's in Florida, and he sent me photos, in fact, of a white fibrous clot still covered in blood when it was first pulled out,
right,
of a living patient in his catheterization lab. And so, and Dr. Philip McMillan has also found a separate cath lab whistleblower who admits, and this gentleman that McMillan found said that he's been pulling anywhere between 3 to 10 of these white fibrous clots out of living people per week in his one cath lab alone. And unlike the embalmers, these doctors do have access to the COVID vaccination records of all their patients. And this gentleman says that whenever he finds the white fibrous clots, the person's been jabbed with anywhere between 1 to 8 jabs, and the more jabs they've had, the worse the clotting seems to be. So
that was my next question. So thank you for answering that. The other question that I have is, you know, you may be familiar with these replicase competent or self-replicating RNA vaccines that have been approved now in Japan, and then just recently, within the last few days, by the European Medicines Association or agency, excuse me. You know, this is, what do you think the implications are here? I mean, we've got something that can replicate in your body, but we know that even without replicase competent vaccines, that these vaccines shed, right?
Correct. Yeah. Good information. I think Dr. Pierre Corey and his partner, Dr. Scott Marsland, talk a lot about the shedding issue, you know, about it being in your exosomes. It's got me scared, Brian, because these mRNA injections, I don't think they have any control over them at all. I mean, they told you that it would stay in your deltoid muscle. Wrong. It was all over your body. And then you can't control the dosage amount. Peter McCullough talks about this, Dr. McCullough, you know, that if the mRNA is only not lasting for just a couple of days a week, but it's lasting for 6 months or maybe even indefinitely if there's no off switch, and it's continually producing spike protein, you know, for the rest of your life, especially if it reverse transcribes into your DNA, now we got some real problems, right? And then 90% of the time it's producing, in the case of the COVID vaccine, the mRNA is producing the correct spike protein, which is dangerous enough in itself. But about 10% of the time, through this frame shifting process, is producing nonsense or aberrant proteins. So they can't control where it goes. They can't control how long it lasts, and they can't even control exactly what it produces. So it's just a disaster as far as I'm concerned. Right? And to me, we should have never put these on the market in the first place. And very quickly after they came out, we should have seen from the VAERS database it was time to pull these things off the market. So
right, you know, and you'll hear all the propaganda. You'll hear, oh, well, you know, this is plug and play. All we have to do is put the genetic code for a different antigen in there, and then we, you know, have these quote unquote life-saving vaccines. And again, this replicase competent, the only reason that I can find that they would do this is so they could vaccinate bystanders. And when you vaccinate bystanders, when you have individuals that are being exposed to lipid nanoparticles that have the phospholipid phosphate group directly on the end, and then they're also producing spike protein, you better believe that you'll see these clots in bystanders that have experienced shedding. I mean, you know, I dare say, I don't want to ask the question because it is random if anybody's reported clots in unvaccinated individuals, but I dare say that could happen.
I think Richard Hirschman and I and a group of scientists that we're working with have come across a person who I believe got clots via a transfusion.
Okay.
He had an operation and we believe there was tainted blood. So I don't know if there's been any specific case of the clots due to exosomes,
right?
And because they have to fight their way through your mucosal membrane, so you've got some more protection there. Whereas the vaccine gets directly injected into you. But you're absolutely right. It is scary because we all deserve to have informed consent. If you don't want something inside you, you shouldn't have to take it. But it looks like they're trying to bypass informed consent and put a vaccine into you that you don't want.
Exactly. Well, Tom, I could spend the rest of the day talking to you. This is so interesting, and it's so vital that people know this. So thank you so much for spreading the word. My hat's off to you. I wish you the best success. If there was ever an HHS administration where you would get traction on this, it would be now. So God bless you. And thank you again for your work.
Thank you, Dr. Hooker, for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us for this episode of Doctors and Scientists. Tell your friends to watch this. Tell those individuals, regardless of their vaccination status, they've got to see this particular show and check out Tom Haviland.
I'm Tracy McDermott.
And how many children have you got?
I have 3 children.
How old are they?
They are 23, 20, and 15. And it was my youngest son, Ty, who was vaccinated we vaccinated up till age 1.
So all of your children are vaccinated to some degree?
Yes.
You don't have a child that's not ever been vaccinated?
No.
Snap.
Yeah. And the interesting part about that, when Ty was vaccinated, I took him in for his 1 year, and I was a stay-at-home mom with Ty. I breastfed for a year, and he was the only one that I didn't go back to work with. And when I took him in for his 1 year visit, he was actually 13 months. We had been out of town the month before when he should have gone in, and all of my children I had brought in on time, exactly when I was told. And when I brought Ty in for his, he that night he got the varicella, the Prevnar.
Prevnar is death in a needle.
That was I think probably the varicella too. And they were he was supposed to get the MMR that day, and the pediatric office was out of it. And I feel really, really blessed because I can't even imagine. He remains nonverbal at 15 today, but behaviorally we have through our efforts and all of our interventions, it's like we have definitely got him to where he's not self-injurious, and but I think that would have just really sent it completely over the edge, as though nonverbal isn't, and lifelong care is certainly devastating. But so
Can you describe him before he had the vaccine, this lethal cocktail of vaccines?
He was just, he was my third baby. We were so easygoing. Yep, that was the top 2.
Look at that big.
Yeah, he was very engaged, adorable. And he was, just happy baby. And shortly after the vaccines, the bottom 2 photos there, he just had a rapid decline.
So this is him before the vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to show YouTube in a minute, Bells, just one sec. And this is him afterwards. The same blank stare, exactly the same look. That could be any of our children, and they all look the same after these vaccines. Bless him.
Yeah, so for us, you know, we he got home that night after those vaccines at 13 months, and he immediately had a fever. My oldest son he was born in 1994. My oldest son, Ty, was born in 2002. So this was 2003, my oldest son had always run very high fevers. So it was third kid. I had vaccinated all my other kids. I had, you know, they had the normal thing where, oh, give them Tylenol, you know, which we all know now is like terrible. And so I think I probably gave Ty Tylenol before I brought him in, you know, just because I knew we were headed down that path. And he got home from that night. It was fevers. It was like 104 fever. It was explosive diarrhea, like to the point where it like burned his skin in his diaper. It was just rancid. And
we're talking about Ty now.
This is Ty in 2003. And so he just had terrible for several days. He was just sicker than a dog. And I called the doctor. The shot site literally raised about a half an inch off his thigh. It had red rings started forming, and it was pussing and it was oozing on his thigh. And I called, and they're like, oh, that's normal. I'm like, should I bring him in? He still has the fever. He's got this diarrhea. Nope, all normal. Don't bring him in. I mean, they didn't even want to see him at the doctor's office. So
did they say why?
No, it's all normal. They said everything you're describing to us is completely a normal reaction for the vaccine. And I'm like, you know, I said, well, I had 3 kids. I said, I don't remember this. I remember the fevers. And they're like, yeah, no, but some kids just have the swelling in the thigh and stuff. So the symptoms probably subsided maybe after about day 5, and the warm compresses on the leg. It was still a hard knot where he had been given the shot, or one of the shots, and it was a hard knot, but it kind of, you know, he settled down. And then he got worse at like day 7, day 8. He got worse again. The fever shot back up, so I brought him back in, and he tested positive for strep, and he had the pneumococcal vaccine. And I said, well, was that part of the vaccines? And they were like, no, it's from your other kids. And I said, well, and they're like, do your other children go to school? And I said, yes. And they're like, well, it's from your other kids that got strep. And I said, but my other kids don't have strep. And I'm like, nobody in the house has strep. And this, you know, Ty was a stay-at-home baby. And so they were like, well, that's what it is. They put him on an antibiotic, and they sent us home for the strep. So we started the antibiotic. The fevers continued, and he broke out in like a full-blown chickenpox rash. And he had the varicella that day too. And he just started getting spots all over. So I called him back, and they were like, oh, he's allergic to the Zithromax we gave you. I'm like,
wait, what's Zithromax?
They gave him the Zithromax for the strep.
Wait, what is that?
That's an antibiotic.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So they gave him that, and they said that the rash was that he was allergic to Zithromax. And so we took him off of that, and they put him on a different antibiotic.
Okay.
And so then about 2 weeks later, he still was having intermittent fevers. He was still having some of the diarrhea. So I took him back in. He has an ear infection. Now, this is a child that we had not, other than his well visits, he had not even been to the doctor. He was stay-at-home baby. He was breastfed. So like, he had not been sick at all. I mean, maybe a cold at one point. So we took him back for the ear infection. They put him on more antibiotics. And by now we were probably 25 days post-vaccines, and I just started noticing that, you know, my mom has her master's in special education, and she taught autistic children in the 70s, and she was on the phone with me. She lived in California, and she was on the phone with me one day, and she heard Ty in the background, and she's like, what is that noise? And I'm like, that's Ty on the baby monitor. And she's like, what is that? And I'm like, all he would do is he would make the high-pitched noises. It's like he wasn't babbling. And she's like, that doesn't sound right. And by then, you know, he was 14 months probably. So I just started Googling, I mean, the the noises. And I mean, that whole month of him being sick, I realized that he had quit babbling. We started, you know, he had quit actually like paying attention to us and looking at us. And I had noticed, that he had started to, he was 1, so we were just starting to put him on, you know, different foods. And I noticed he started spitting the foods, and he was choking on them. So he was literally, he like had a gag reflex, and he just totally, you know, started to completely went back to like the thrusting, like when you'd feed him, he, you know, And we just saw massive regression.
Did you know then that it was the vaccines?
Ironically, when I started Googling at 14 and a half, 15 months, I started Googling. I was the loss of babble is what I was trying to track back, like when I lost the speech. And when I started seeing, Generation Rescue, I started seeing the stories, and I was like, this is like totally what we're seeing. And he would sit and he would just flip books, and he'd face the wall and flip books in his play area where he used to completely, have appropriate toy play, and nothing. And, my husband is a flight attendant, and every time he would come in through the garage, Ty would want to like ride his luggage to the staircase. So he would run, and he's like, he doesn't even come. I mean, like when he'd come back from a 3-day trip, it's like Ty wouldn't even look up. His player was right by the garage door, and he would not even look up. My husband would just come in, and he would nothing. I mean, we completely lost him. Ty was evaluated. When he went in for that visit, he met every major milestone on his checklist at that well visit at 13 months old. And when early childhood intervention came out to evaluate him at 18 months, because I immediately knew something was wrong, they put him at a cognitive level of a 3-month-old baby.
So just to be absolutely clear, in case there's anybody watching that doesn't understand, you have 3 children, of which you vaccinated them all. You did everything that you were completely told
on
to
time,
do.
every time.
And your child is, let's be honest here, like my son, extremely injured from these vaccines.
Yes. I mean, he will need lifelong care. He's 15, he's nonverbal. He's been in special education in a self-contained classroom all his life, and
Can you try to explain to those that maybe don't understand, haven't lived through what we've lived through, what exactly that does to your soul when someone rips your child right before you, and it could have been prevented?
And this is what kind of, rocks my core, is that not only could it have been prevented, but my older son, when he was vaccinated in 1994, after I started doing the research on Ty, and my older son, after every single vaccine, this is his pediatric file, and to make it easier to read.
Let me just go a little closer on some of these. Let's just
after every single vaccine, he was sick, and he was like,
this is the older child.
This is my son that was vaccinated in 1994, and he was in the doctor's office.
Sorry, have I done this the wrong way around?
Yeah, that's 94.
Okay, let's start here, guys.
That's
Sorry.
the oldest.
Do carry on talking while I show them.
And so basically, we were just round robin into the pediatrician's office. You can see every time he was vaccinated, he had bronchitis, ear infection, bronchiolitis. And after he got the MMR, he ended up in the hospital with ITP, and ended up having to stay in the hospital and get IVIG therapy, which I find is so ironic because that's an intervention that they sometimes use with autistic kids, and he was just very, very sick. After the IVIG, he was sick all the time. So I really believe that, the immune system, they cannot handle it. It's just too much. And for Ty, had I known when my oldest son was in the hospital for the IVIG, the hematologist that treated him was the top hematologist. This guy was the top for the East Coast. He did all the pediatric AIDS cases that, at that time in 1996. And I said to him, how did the kids get the ITP? And he said, we don't know. We see about 1 case a month in a child of your age. So at the time, I think he was about 1.5. And I said, so you have no idea, because I was pregnant with my daughter when my oldest was in the hospital. He said, no, we don't know how it happens. It's on the vaccine pamphlet. They never asked me had he been vaccinated. I mean, and that's where I think the problem lies, is that it doesn't matter what is happening to these kids, to these doctors. They will never correlate it. You can tell them, you can say to them, I watched this happen. I know this was a reaction. And this hematologist was like saying to me, I didn't know then that it was even on the vaccine packet. I learned that 7 years later researching Ty's reactions. But to me, it's like, how could you not know that? Of course you knew that. You know, if you're seeing one case a month, every kid is walking in here and you're saying, I just don't know how that happens. I mean, so that's where, I think that's where I feel that parents are not informed. They are not getting the information that they should be getting. I mean, it is not informed consent when you bring your children in to be vaccinated. Ty's strep titers, this was done in, this was 2006. So 2 years later, we had his strep titers tested. We spent years trying to get those strep titers. They registered in at 1045. They were supposed to be, in 150 is normal titers. And his body thinks he is fighting strep all the time. I mean, it's constant. And I always laughed every time his teacher would call me up. She's like, oh, strep is going around school. You should probably be, keep an eye on Ty. And I'm like, he thinks he's fighting it. I'm like, he's fighting it all the time. I mean, we spent years trying to get, ironically, the titers down, and lo and behold, they gave him Zithromax. He never was allergic to Zithromax. I think the rash that he got when he had that was probably from the varicella, because for 2 years he broke out randomly with like chicken pox like rashes for 2 years, and we could never figure out, what it was or why, but full trunk rashes, just like he had after the vaccine reaction. He had that for years.
So you've been listening to parent stories,
and
they're exactly the same.
Yep.
When you came to Generation Rescue, whether you watch them online here or whatever it may be, it's the same story.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again. What do you say to the people that say, listen, love, I'm sorry, it's not the vaccine.
It didn't happen. I became a grandma 4 weeks ago. My oldest just had a baby. And we went to interview pediatricians. And I had a pediatrician 6 weeks ago tell me, you don't know what you're talking about. And I said, I watched it happen, and I'm concerned with his history, and, I watched it happen. So, it's out there. That baby was born locally in a major hospital locally here. And the delivery nurse told me that the vitamin K shot was the gel they put in your eye.
Really? Oh my gosh.
What do you say to that? I mean, there is no education whatsoever for the.
It should be a criminal offence. If someone says that to a young mom that's a lie, it should be a criminal offence. That is medical negligence to the highest degree.
I mean, it just shows you how little they know. So when any physician tells me it didn't happen, I'm like, you have no idea. And I tell my story. I bring my results. I mean, people say to me, there's no issue with toxicity. Really? Because I have from 2006 to 2007, I mean, elevated. This is natural. This is through just supplementing his methylation cycle, the excretion of mercury, aluminum, lead.
Wait, so aluminium. The reference range is 60 and he's 110.
All elevated.
Mm-hmm.
Elevated. Mercury. Reference range 5, he's 13.
This is a year. This was just random urine samples.
Should be 60 reference range.
Well, look at that
140
mercury.
up there on aluminium.
Look at this.
Mercury should be in reference range of 5. He's up there at 16.
Yeah.
Don't worry, trolls. This is all just normal. Should be 60. Is up there at 200 on aluminium and 6.1 on mercury. Nothing to worry about here. Should be 60, 92. It's a disgrace.
Yeah.
And this is when, this was around. This was Christmas. You can see how excited he is to open his presents. This was Halloween. I mean, he was gone. After we started interventions to reduce his toxic load, to reduce the strep titers, we had to wait 7 years to get insurance to cover the IVIG therapy, because it was about $8,000 an infusion. And when he was 7, but you can see, even after we started the diet, you can see where he started to come back. I mean, we did
So
have
diet was a very big part of
diet. The diet
gosh.
definitely helped. He saw, I mean, we were very blessed in that, you know, I have heard a lot of horror stories of people having a hard time, especially back in 2003, getting their kids diagnosed, you know, as young as we did. I knew at 14, 15 months, as soon as my mom said, that's not right, his babbling's gone, she's like, you need to, you know, and I said, well, he's doing this weird thing, he's like shaking his hands, he's toe walking, he's looking sideways at the TV. I mean, I knew right away. And so it was my mission. Everyone told me, I mean, early education told me, you know, through the school system, you'll never get him diagnosed this young, you know, because it was just starting. The flood of diagnoses were just kind of starting back then. And I took him to a neurologist, and I brought in all my video footage, and he's like, I usually have to sit here and tell a parent that no, that, you know, or that, you know, I'm sorry, and, you know, your child has autism. And he's like, you are coming to me and clearly telling me, and he's like, you're right. And so he was diagnosed at 18 months. And ironically, he recommended to me, there was like really not very many doctors, you know, starting to do interventions, or it was just starting, you know, it was difficult to get to them. And there was a cancer nutritionist locally, and he's like, he has an autistic child, you should take your son and see if he'll see you. And he did, and we started him on supplementing, you know, his immune system, and we started to do some small interventions that, you know, we got back some of the eye contact, and that's when then we started traveling to other doctors, and, you know, but I really thought that we would, when we reduced the toxicity, I really thought we would get language back, and we just never did. It's, you know, it's just...
Describe what a typical day is like for your son, what these vaccines have taken from
I
the
mean,
boy.
you know, for him, it's you know, his day is his day. You know, for us, it's what we have lost as a family. You know, for so many years, everything was just centered around his routine. You know, we can't, you know, I can't even tell you how many times, you know, my daughter, we've had to do things where one of us gets to take her, one of us gets to travel with her, you know. We are in an airline family, we fly for free. I mean, we try to get out and about, and it's just somebody has to stay home with Ty. I mean, every time that it's a big undertaking, as you know. I mean, to get out of the house, to do anything, you know, it's you're having to plan, and it's much easier to leave him behind, and then you have the guilt of, you know, well, I should have him out in the community more, and, you know, but it's hard. I mean, it takes a village, and I mean, we've been very fortunate that, you know, we have a lot of family that has supported us, but I mean, I think the whole family has, you know, we have a saying in our house, it's Ty's world, we just live in it, you know. I mean, to answer your question, you give up everything. I mean, everything revolves around the care of your child. Yeah.
What do you think it's going to take for this whole thing to break? I mean, how many more stories do people have to hear before they realize it's the same story over and over again?
I don't know, because when you see any report and you see the comments, like on Facebook, on any report that you ever see, people, the mantra of that, what they regurgitate, I mean, they just regurgitate all of the lies that the media puts out there. You can't ever get an unbiased report on any major news network, you know. And like I said, you have doctors that, you know, are telling me that the vitamin K shot is the gel in the eye. I'm like, are you for a newborn? I think that we can only continue to do what we're doing and to keep telling the stories. But I know it makes a difference. I mean, I do know it makes a difference, but it is maddening to see how slow. I mean, when I think back that I have been doing this for 14 years, I mean.
Your grandchild, girl or boy?
Boy.
Has he been vaccinated?
No.
How's he doing at 4 weeks old?
He is holding his head up. He is doing awesome.
At 4 weeks old, he's
up, and he's working it, and he's doing awesome. He's already gained 2 pounds.
This is your daughter's child?
No, this is actually my son.
Now, how did you get your son to marry someone that gets the situation? Because that's every parent who has a son is like, uh-oh. It's a bit easier with a daughter, but with a son.
Well, he was always my strong-willed child, and so he is awesome. I can only do what I can do.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? So I said to them, I'm going to send you the books. My son had actually already written several. My son had actually already read several, of the books. Both of my kids have worked autism into their college papers and their journey and stuff. So I think it's kind of ironic that they're both very well educated on the topic of, vaccine
That's the
injury.
key, peeps. That is the key.
I mean, so they've been writing papers and stuff on it since they were, all through school and they tell their story, So I think that's, that's part of it. But yeah, no, it was, there.
Now, I think we should tell people, you're going to like this story, people, but basically wind your minds back to when we were in the UK and Brian Burrows, Anu and myself, Suzanne took a different flight, but we flew to Dallas and we were in our usual little economy like we always are, and then the guy who was looking after us recognized one of our t-shirts.
Yes, he did.
Our wax top. You may remember this because we talked about it the next day about we met this amazing guy, and that was her husband.
Yes.
And he really looked after.
Yes.
I mean,
he was super excited to see you guys on his flight.
He was great, and I was having a little drink in those days, Pete, and he made sure that I had everything I needed. But what a lovely guy! And then he showed us a picture of your son's name on the bus.
Oh yes,
It was just a really lovely flight back, and so give him our love.
I
Thank
will.
him very
He's
much.
in London today, and he'll be back tomorrow. He was sorry he missed it. So he
a
wanted
real
to be here.
character. And so that was when I just saw you just now. You said my husband's the guy that looked after you on the flight. So that's a little snippet there.
Yeah.
But yes, he was it was random that we met, and it was a wonderful meeting. So
Yeah.
So what about your boy's future? What have we got lined up for him?
He's, he will be in school for 4 more years, and we are going to have to cross that bridge. We are just starting to look at, day centers for him to go during the day. I mean, it's going to be family. It's going to be family. I mean, both of my, older children know that they will always be helping with their brother. Always.